Attention, all you fishes in the sea. Come swim on in and check out my interview with John Paul Hughes from Glasgow's critically acclaimed shoegaze psychedelic rock band Helicon, where we talk about music, film, and his newly released collaboration with Al Lover called Arise. Come swim on in and give it a listen. John Paul Hughes on the fishbowl from
How you
Helicon.
doing?
Welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to swim in the bowl with me.
We've swam in a few bowls in our time, but it's a completely different thing.
In all fairness, the bowl can get a little smoky sometimes. So
It can.
a little foggy, a little haze,
Yeah. Why not, man?
especially listening to Helicon. So
Well, I am talking to you right now from our rehearsal space in just outside Glasgow, and the guys are due here about 6:30 tonight. So a couple hours time, but I've got a little smoky in here later. Let's say. Won't be such a clear view by the time they arrive.
Right. I had to use like the squeegee thing, and my next pun is I hope the temperature is just right.
Oh yeah. Well, it's about -6, -7 degrees here in Glasgow just now. So that's one temperature
Right.
that's not right. But we'll sort that later. Don't worry about that. That's all good, man.
Exactly. I gotta go out and shovel after this. So that's what it's like here.
Is it really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We've the last like week has been nothing but snowstorm, icy. You know, I'm basically frozen under the bowl.
Yeah.
I could do fish puns all day. I have endless ones. You know, but we are here to talk about Helicon. I know we've been friends on Facebook for a while. I've been a avid follower of the band for, the past couple of years. Love, love the last album you guys did, God Intentions. The live version, I like. I'm not sure which album I like more, the studio version or the
Mm.
live version.
Oh, really?
Um, love both of them.
Mm.
I should probably say equally, but you're one of the bands that I wish at some point in the future could make it to the States to do a touring gig, especially come to Pittsburgh. I could give you a list of venues that you guys could play at, but your music and just everything, it's like you're definitely one of the bands that I am envious of all the music that's coming out of the not just like the UK and Glasgow, but Europe in general. In the States we have, some good music, but it's all on the underground and
Mm.
you know there's like I've just noticed, I've been following different areas of the country, where there's big music scenes and the two, well, I guess it's technically a continent, which is Australia, and I guess the other one is New Zealand. But I have seen so many just they keep popping up with like not just like, shoegaze and, psychedelic stuff like that, but like prog rock, classic rock vibes, like new punk alternative, a band from Australia that I'm a huge fan of that I really want to get on the show is, I'm not sure if you remember them, they're called Full Flower Moon Band.
No?
Really good,
Mm.
really good. Iggy Pop on his radio show that I think that's in like the UK, right? I think
Yeah.
so.
Yep.
He featured some of their music on his radio show. Really awesome band, and I'm just like very envious of the whole UK and Europe area, especially Berlin is another area that I've seen a lot of great music come from recently with like Blues Pills and the Spiders and just like another musician from the UK that I'm a big fan of is Rosalie Cunningham,
Oh, yeah.
um, who I'm supposed to eventually get on the show, but her latest album was you know so effing good. And another artist that's similar to Rosalie is Bobby Dazzle, who just
Yeah.
released a debut album this year, and it's phenomenal as well.
I,
Um,
I really appreciate you saying that, man, because I think that it's obviously, you watch how you do on streaming services and you watch how you do and all and it's really interesting. Obviously, we know that the harm that can do for the
exactly.
industry and for musicians, but it's also, it's there forever and you're gonna have to play the game whether you like it or not. And to know that that's reaching people like you, that's getting to places like Pittsburgh, and it's getting all across the states, it's getting into all these other countries. It really means a lot. It allows us to do that, and the fact that we'd love to get to the States one day. I really appreciate you saying that about the record because there was a lot of time and effort went into that. It felt like we had achieved something we'd been trying to achieve maybe with the previous records and had built towards. So to hear that feedback from you and say that really means a lot. And actually, funnily enough, we are moving to a new booking agent very soon, who is the same booking agent for Rosalie Cunningham. So
Oh, awesome! That's Cherry Red Records.
it's an individual who we've been working with who works through different agencies. So who knows? We might get the dream lineup there one day.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, what a show! What a show!
Mhm.
I mean, with Rosalie, the one in Bobby Dazzle, I was promoting the hell out of it. Every time I saw it on Facebook, I shared, shared. And the show where it was Bobby Dazzle opening for Rosalie Cunningham,
Mhm.
like that would have been was a show that I was like so envious of, like the two power, female, prog rock, like the queen and the princess essentially, you performing.
That would probably make us the jesters in their court then dancing around.
Right, right. And they totally could have had, a gesture, dressed up with the type of music they make, it totally would have worked, but that was a show that I was just like, oh my God, and also like all the festivals that happen, and in the UK and Europe in general. Some of the ones that I've seen you play, your band play, Helicon,
Mhm.
another dear friend of mine who I'm sure you know, Stanley Belton, a
Very
Black
well.
Market Karma.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he was like the first shoegaze kind of like band that I had on the show, and I am waiting to hear back from him about getting him
Really?
on for a second interview,
Stanza.
especially with the
Stan's a
new
good guy.
EP.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
he's a really good guy. In fact, going back, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Helicon's first ever gig was with Black Market Karma.
awesome.
The first time we ever played, it was someone who was in the band at the time, I think, had been kind of early Facebook friends with Stan and we were following each other. So Stan and I and my brother Gary have become good friends over the years. And they travelled all the way up from London to East Kilbride, the little town that we are from, just outside Glasgow, to come and play with us in our first ever show. And it's been great now that we've crossed paths so many times and we're now both on the same label. And kind of seeing each other kind of come up through the levels has been great because Stan's a good guy. He's very, very committed. He's a kind of driving force behind that project, and he's a bit like Helicon. He's had a lot of musicians come and go within the band over the years because as things start to build and develop, I always say Helicon it feels a bit more like at times rather than a band, a bit more like a collective of musicians because we just have to continually evolve and move forward. And sometimes, as bands get a little bit more, as the demands become more for touring and for recording, it can be difficult. As none of us are teenagers anymore,
Right,
so we all we all have other demands on our time. So you can understand why some people maybe need to come away from it, but Stan's been the one constant that's driven that band Black Market Karma through to where they are now, and there's been a lot of similarities that have kind of come through that alongside each other.
definitely, definitely. I mean, one person who you can tell him this from me, and I'll shoot him a message on Facebook as well, but Jason Shaw with Fuzz Club Records. I've learned basically of like the different labels,
Mhm.
that make the type of music that I love listening to. And I like to consider myself like a music aficionado. Like, I like all different genres of music, but if I had to like, center it on one genre, I would definitely be more of a rocker than,
Mhm.
any other genre. And
Yep.
with that, it's like I love Jimi Hendrix and the British Invasion music with like the Beatles and the Who and Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and the Doors, and just all the classic rock stuff. How that like evolved, and then you had like punk, and punk was a huge scene, especially in the UK and the US. And then like you had like the grunge movement, which like I kind of consider like the last actual like universal musical movement that
Mm.
we had, and that was like universally worldwide, not just for grunge, but I mean, going to one of the fundamentals of what shoegaze has become, obviously the Dandy Warhols and the Brian Jonestown Massacre,
Mm.
along with like Ride, which really want to interview those guys, and then like, the Jesus Mary Chain, My Bloody Valentine, bands that help form, the what shoegaze and dream pop and what that sound has like specifically developed into
Mm.
today. You can really attribute to like those bands, and then even further back with classic rock, Lou Reed, the Velvet Underground, and Pink Floyd as being big, major influences that would later, become what shoegaze has kind of turned
Mm.
into. But it's like my two favorite genres, ironically, because they contrast each other,
Mm.
is like shoegaze, dream pop. I can't get enough of it, and the contrastic, like like Sabbathian metal,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like the old school, Sabbath, like doom metal, stoner rock, like that stuff. I'm really, really into. The only type of metal that I kind of have I can't listen to is like, yeah,
Aye.
but, if it's like metal and back to like Rosalie and Bobby Dazzle, hearing like prog rock, well, the amazing music they create, and hearing like again Blues Pills and like the Spiders and just bands like them. And I'll even throw another one out there, bringing out the Doors,
Mhm.
Birth of Joy. Birth of Joy is like hearing the Doors, literally reincarnated.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well,
hearing like bands that aren't necessarily like prog rock, and they're not necessarily like, psychedelic or heavy metal, but they have it's like, it's kind of like, Clockwork Orange in a sense. Like the old is like, new again, and it's just in society in general. It's like we're
yeah. I
literally
think
living.
yeah, I think you say that the old becomes the new again. It's you nothing will ever be entirely original, but I think the most important thing that you can do if you're going to have any level of integrity around the music that you're trying to make, you're trying to create something with a level of permanency that will
Right.
last, that is not part of a fleeting era or phase or bandwagon or anything like that that's on it. And so you're always going to draw from somewhere. But I think what's most important is you can take it from wherever you want, but where do you take it to? What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it that's new and fresh and exciting? And can you bring these other things together to try and offer up something that is less derivative than what a lot of stuff that you can hear that's heavily influenced by very specific, massively world famous bands, and you can't help it. It's going to seep in there because it's in your DNA from you're a kid. It's going to come out somewhere. But are you self aware enough and self critical enough to realize when something is derivative of something else, and can you then take that and blend it with something to try and move it somewhere new? So I think that's these new generations artists that you've got, and I'm also hopeful that there's hopefully a bit of a resurgence back towards musicianship and traditional instrumentation and all these things as well. Because I mean, fucking hell, how many times have we been told over the years that the guitar music's dead?
Right, right.
It's not, and it never will be.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. The mainstream may say that,
Mm.
but if you look at all these bands, I mean, not just in the UK, but in the States, and just, around, in Australia, New Zealand, around the world. I mean, like there's a band I really like a lot from Cambodia, and they're actually called the Cambodian Space Project. Yeah.
I think was it Jason Shaw in that band at
Yeah,
one
yeah,
point? Ah,
I
yeah,
believe he
yeah,
was. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
obviously how I found out about them. But the fact that like, their reach all the way out there,
Mm.
And again with Jason Shaw and some of the bands he's produced, I'm friends with the people from Frankie Teardrop Dead and
Yeah, they're really nice people. They're great people.
Geography of the Moon as well. I've had them
Mhm.
on my show, and they're all like playing in Cambodia right now.
Yeah.
And like,
It was I saw Carling and Ben from Frankie
yeah,
Teardrop there
yeah,
as well in Manchester. You know, we hung out with those guys quite a few times. Really nice people. So I'm glad to see they're over there doing well and enjoying it. You know.
exactly. And the thing that like I'm surprised, but also like really impressed with is that like all the way in that area of the world with everything that's happened there, like, you know, from the past up till now,
Hmm.
to see that like there's actually a huge listenership for that type of music
Hmm.
in that area, like says to me, well, this basically means that this music is universal,
Hmm.
and like if a band like those bands can play in that area of the world and have shows, have people come, pay tickets, and just like any other show in any other part of the
Hmm.
country or world, there's a market for it.
Hmm.
And I'm really like just proud that like, that type of music and, music in general, which, has the power to like produce memories and all sorts of different feelings, and inspirations and stuff, can reach, that part, and just says it can reach, you know, basically worldwide. So I kind of consider, like, I guess you could there's a lot of different like rock movements going on right now that the mainstream is paying no attention to, and it's all like, Taylor Swift and
Hmm.
Beyonce and Sabrina Carpenter and, all these people, and, like, not to, diss that music or anything, but, a movie from when I was in high school kind of explains that type of music, and, Josie and the Pussycats.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
you know, anyone who is, around our age, who has seen that movie, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's really funny if you think about it, because what that movie's plot line was is almost exactly what's like going on right now in the music industry. It's one of those things where like art imitates reality and
Yeah.
reality imitates art.
It's one of
Um,
it's one of the ironies of the way that music is today is that it's never been easier to create and put music out, but arguably never been harder to be heard because
yeah,
the such is the volume of music and you know when you create music or you are trying to create an art form that will connect with people or will touch in a certain way. And certainly when we write songs, I in particular don't really write songs that have a particular meaning or narrative as such. It's much more emotion led. So it's kind of what emotion are we trying to communicate here? What is the feeling that we're trying to put into someone
right.
that's there that we're trying to say, this is what we do you get that? But I think one of the things that's interesting about that is that, as I said, recording equipment's become cheaper. We know, and obviously, listen, there's different levels of that you want to create that content and the quality of that content to be in production values but yet younger generations of people, they're becoming more and more used to listening to music through phones, through terrible speakers or little AirPods, or they're watching movies on phones. So there's never been more platforms for you to use to try and reach people. But such is the volume of content and music and art that's put in here and pushed out to these people because, you know, as a try to get people to listen to your music or try to get people to connect with any art form, you're not just competing with other music or all music and the history of recording music is available on someone's fingertips. You're competing with every other thing that person can do in that moment. Watch the
Exactly.
television, go to Netflix, go for. It's all there all the time. So, as I said, it might never have been easier for people to create music and release music in a certain way with, self-publishing all these things. But arguably, it might never have been harder to actually be heard because the volume of stuff that comes at people and now the siloed way that the distribution through these online platforms gives people more of what they're already doing, stops people from crossing over and being able to get into other things that maybe they hadn't done. And for me, that's always been part of what Helicon and psychedelic music is about, is blending and blurring lines between genres and taking things and being more experimental and being able to pull things from other genres and other art forms and blend these in and bringing them in a way that sort of communicate the psychedelic experience. I think too often that word psychedelic and psychedelia is a kind of lazy catch-all term when people don't quite know how to categorize something, or somebody hits a fucking tremolo pedal goes and all of a sudden that's psychedelic. Oh, is it really? So psychedelic music is about breaking form. It's
Right.
about I mean, not obviously you get psychedelic pop and stuff like that, which follows certain narratives and the structures, and there's certain things that you need to put in there that your listener will want and need to keep them hooked in. But I think the more that you can break those forms and blend them with other things, the greater chance you give yourself of creating something that's fresh, that's distinctive, and that has that word that I mentioned earlier, that permanency that isn't of a time, that could be listened to. And it's always been the goal that someone would pick up your record in 30, 40, or 50 years' time, and it will sound as fresh and relevant to them then as it did when you put it out.
Exactly. I mean, to your point, Pink Floyd, perfect
Yeah.
example. Dark Side of the Moon, I know it's a big commercial album, but
Hmm.
you have to look at like why it's still sound like
Hmm.
it's timeless. You
Hmm.
know, people 200 years from now, assuming we're all still here and haven't blown each other to hell.
I wouldn't bet on
Right. Um,
it.
assuming we're all still here, and let's hope we're like closer towards like, the Star Trek, future versus like the Blade Runner,
Yeah.
THX 1138,
Uh,
you know, future. But assuming we're all here 200 years later, people will still be listening to Pink Floyd and Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Metal, Animals, all the classic stuff. You know, I
I,
I
I,
wouldn't
I was
say I
actually
wouldn't say so much like the later Floyd,
no,
but
yeah.
definitely like Sid Barrett Floyd
Mhm.
and the height of Floyd in like the 70s. People listen to same thing with Led Zeppelin, the
Yeah,
Beatles.
yeah.
I mean, the Rolling Stones.
Hmm.
There's a reason why like that music is still,
Hmm.
relevant. The same goes for like the grunge stuff, and the 90s era, even the 80s, as much as I hated hair metal, I mean, listen to how many of those songs are like in
Hmm.
movies and stuff. And to also like credit what we were just talking about with the music industry, it's like the same thing is going on with the film industry.
Hmm.
And I actually want to say, because I went to school for screenwriting and, I'm like involved with it, with interviewing people and stuff like that and writing and stuff. But I would say that like it's almost while it is like you said, just as easy as it is to make music, it's just as hard to get it out there. I'd say that that's true, but with music versus film, at least right now, it's a lot easier to make music. And while you struggle just as equally trying to get it out there, you still have a better chance with music versus film,
I agree. I
especially
agree.
with the
Yeah.
mainstream. Yeah, because I think I mean, sure you have to like, put money into each album and touring and merch and stuff like that. But I feel like music as a platform versus film it's a lot easier to, get to do all that stuff and almost get a return, not just, money wise, but like listenership wise, follower wise, stuff like that versus film. Because film is very iffy. It's all about, money. And unfortunately, from where we came in the 70s, 80s, and 90s to where we are now, it's all about how can we make a return versus, the art form. And most of Hollywood and the film industry in general around the world has lost the idea that film is an art form versus, a commercial,
Absolutely,
bank return.
absolutely. And I think you're 100% correct in that, and there are parallels in the two as well. And and sadly, probably the more concerning thing, or not the more concerning thing, but as we see this shift towards from major governments around the world towards more right wing governments as they start to go as well, that this appreciation for the arts is undermined the further that starts to swing. And again, partly because there are more tools and mediums and platforms for people to do now, they start to say, well, these things do need funding. Filmmakers need funding. Musicians need funding. They need government backing. They need to be able, it's, you've talked about film there and we talked about music and I talked about, where they go with these albums and how they get better and better and better as you go through. That's the development of craft. And
Exactly.
you can't develop craft in any art form if you're not given the time and space to do it. If you're
Exactly.
if you're having to go bust your ass in a 9 to 5 job or or working crazy hours through the night and all of these things are there, then you don't get the time to sit down and put in those 10,000, 100,000 hours that everybody talks about, that you've got to build this thing up and get it and understand and get better at it and refine it. And then you then have the shift towards these, visually, this short form content on YouTube where everything's done in, 5 minutes and 10 minute snaps and the attention span of the next generation of audiences gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And their
Exactly.
willingness to move into experience anything new becomes harder and harder and harder. I think whilst there's so many green shoots of positivity and encouragement and creativity that you see going on, I'm genuinely really worried about the future of arts for that because in music, in film, in television, and all these things that you see as well, what they're looking for is existing IP that they can then take and draw out and sell into as many countries as quickly as they possibly can
Yes.
and translate
Yes.
that and bring that back. And even the way, even things like classic comedy shows, you're not going to get that anymore because now it's about how can we package this thing up and distribute it into as many territories that people come back to time and time and time and time again. And you
Right.
see the same that with and music has been an interesting model the way it started to shift, and you start to see some of those pop stars that you talked about earlier really getting ahead of the game and understanding how the internet and how social media and how streaming platforms worked and how they could channel that to their own advantage. But I also think those days are kind of gone now as well. I think that
Yeah.
you had to be ahead of the game really early. If you're seeing that bandwagon now, it's already too late. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These people are
Yeah.
so
It's like,
far ahead of it. So
I was just
where it
gonna
goes now, I don't know, but I'm genuinely worried about it.
I completely agree. The attention span thing is a big
Mm,
issue. The fact of the matter is, like, the Gen Z generation has been like spoon fed Marvel or
mhm,
DC or some sort of comic book iteration for the last 10 plus years.
mhm,
And we're still doing it. The audience, at the box office has shown that like it's starting to definitely go down with comic book stuff, which is why Hollywood's next idea is like, well, we ran up the comic book thing,
mhm,
now let's go to, like you said, IP. And there's so much IP,
mhm,
that you could literally do like 10 to 20 years of IP stuff, until that runs dry. But then what do you do? You
By
know,
that time, AI will have taken over anyway, and
exactly.
we won't have any need for musicians or filmmakers or anybody else at that point. We'll all just be sitting. It's like,
Right, right. And if it's like what Musk said, then AI has already taken over
yeah,
mainstream music.
aye,
So
yeah,
literally people like you and all the bands we talked about, and people who are, don't have that aren't already famous
hmm
and
hmm
and don't already have like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and a massive fan base from, what they did prior, or were backed by, whoever to push them to the front of the line. I mean, that's literally how Taylor Swift,
hmm
became Taylor Swift. She
hmm
was backed by, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and she put it into, her first performance, and, had all this money essentially to, put it on the streamers and pay for the followers. And now there's the Swifties that I kind of relate to, like people with, uh, some sort of like cult following.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
But
you know,
careful, careful what you say. They'll come after you.
I know, you know, uh, but that's them. I think people like you, Ben, Carling, all the people, Geography of the Moon, all the people that another band I want to mention, Ghost Patterns, and
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Friends of ours as well.
yes, great band. I've been trying. I want to get them on the show, as well as Lex's
hmm
other band that she's with. Bug Eye, I believe,
hmm
is the name. Do I have that right? I want to make sure.
I'm not sure. I know she left Ghost Patterns not so long ago, and Terry and the guys are still going there. But yeah, I'm not sure what her new band is.
I think it's Bug Eye, if
hmm
something like that. Either way, I want to get Lex's new band on the show, as well as Ghost Patterns. But like, you guys are, I want to say, like, really the last, like, rock and rollers, like the doing, essentially what is described as like punk, doing what you can to get your music out there, and fight to get it out there, and do what you have to do, and until you can reach as many audiences, which is part of why I feel it's like my duty, and not someone who listens to mainstream and is like, the Josie and the Pussycats people, but
hmm hmm
actually what Josie and the Pussycats was supposed to be,
Yeah.
with the initial start out with what they wanted, in the plot line for the movie.
I think that's what it can get frustrating, and we all have times when we bang our heads against the wall and we think, is this worth continuing, man? Should we keep? But then I think what you just need to remind yourself is why you started doing it in the first place.
Right.
And if you started, we didn't start Helicon until we were in our mid 30s. Like it's the only band I've ever been in. I wasn't a guy who was around bands my whole life. Lots of our guys in our band were. Mike was in bands like the Trembling Bells, and Graham was in a band who was doing really, really well, Figure Five. Back in the day, they were out touring with Kula Shaker and all these kind of people. And Seb's been in loads of bands over the years, and they've these guys have been at it from teenagers, whereas I came at it much, much, much later in life, where I brought it to. So this has been my kind of pet project all up from day one. Whereas, you know, Mike and Graham and Seb, guitar players and drummers, and our keys and sitar player, they've been the kind of backing band and been part of bands like Kaleidoscope. Peter Daltrey's Kaleidoscope.
Definitely, definitely great band.
So those guys have played as part of that band. They've played with Twink, as I mentioned. That they've played with Mike Herron's Incredible String Band. So they've been in lots of bands over the years and done these things, and it's been great because that's the craft development that I talk about, where you're in different places and you're spending this time learning different styles, learning different genres, learning different techniques, learning from people who have done it 30, 40 years, and more from you where it gets to. But what it brings it back to is that at times you're going, okay, maybe we're not we're not getting big enough fast enough, or you start to get frustrated with it. But when that happens, I think the most important thing you can do is remind yourself why you started, and you didn't start this for other people. You didn't start this to try and make a buck. You didn't start this to try and get famous or do any of these things that you know, always hear people talk, hear old pop stars and rock stars going, you know, I wanted to be on this show, and never had any of that. But the reason you started it and the reason you did it was for your own sanity and your own self-expression, and that compulsion that you had something to get out of you, and it just so happens that music would be the medium that you would choose to do that because it's the one that matters to you most. So when those frustrations come, I think it's important to remind yourself of that, and it grounds you a little bit. But what I think what it also does is it reminds you to the art form that you're creating and whatever that is, whether it's music or film, you have to make it for yourself first and foremost. If you chase an audience, or if you I'm not saying that of course you have to think about as you craft a song where things will be and how they you know, let's give the audience a big lift at this moment here where it starts to move, and then bring them back down and and you think that way. But if you're making that music, or you're making your art form, be it film or whatever it happens to be for anybody else, then to me you're inauthentic. You are using it as a vehicle for something else rather than what it should be is. Because if it makes you feel something and it's authentic and it's real and it is genuine self-expression and you're making it for yourself and you really feel it and you really work at it, it will connect with someone else. When you're setting out in a more cynical way to deliberately try and do something to capture a particular audience or demographic of people with it, then you know, I think real people who care about real art can smell that bullshit a mile off.
Exactly. There's actually I just saw a quote. I forget who said it, but someone, might have been like David Lynch or like one of the old school like
Mm,
filmmakers basically said exactly in so many words what you just said
mm,
about film. And
mm,
that's why film is in trouble like it is right now. You know, the audiences are dwindling, the attention span, you know, like we talked about earlier, is becoming shorter and shorter to like that of like a ferret,
mm,
literally. And, you know, like I noticed a big generational gap a few years ago. You know, I'm 36, going to be
mm,
37 in April. And one of my all-time favorite science fiction films is Blade Runner.
mm,
And I think Blade Runner, to talk about, you know, on the subject of the music, the score for the film alone with the special effects, how that movie was made in I think 1982 it came out, and you know to that film still holds up. Like,
mm,
sure, there's some stuff that, you know, like the Atari stuff, you know,
mm.
that's like in the background. We know what happened to Atari now, but you know, like the sets and the visual effects and you know the concept of like the flying cars, and they actually just like released the first like official flying car for purchase. And if you look at what the model looks like, it's very similar, you know, type of model to
Well,
uh the,
we've got three. There's three different synthesizers in here. There's a Moog, there's a Korg, there's a Selena string ensemble over there, and there's a I think there's a wee Roland there as well. And we spend a lot of time in 2025, 2024, into 2025, still trying to find the exact sounds that were used in Blade Runner, just so we can sort them out. So like, there, that's the one, that's the one. That's a lifelong pursuit to find those to get
right,
those
right,
just right.
right,
Aye, aye.
right. But I mean, like to our generation, like
Mm,
that's one of our favorite films
mm,
of all time. And then like if you look at kids that were like, I want to say like mid 90s to Gen Zers, they can't sit through, you know, the film, and it's boring to them.
Mhm.
Not all Gen Zers and not all the generation that was born mid 90s into Gen Z, but sure, there's a bunch of them, a good portion that has an appreciation for film and stuff like that. But it's like the same thing I noticed when the first like Evil Dead remake came out, and basically the first gen who grew up with like Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness,
Mhm.
and like were fans of Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi, before Sam Raimi went into like, professional film and Spider-Man and all that stuff. But like we were like, this movie fucking sucks. This is, this is not Evil Dead, you
Mhm.
know. Me from a writer's perspective, I could give you a whole list of reasons why that movie is terrible,
Mhm.
besides not being Evil Dead, which I
Mhm.
I won't go into. But you know, like it's the same thing, like and the fact that Hollywood is literally like rebooting and remaking and adding sequels, to stuff. The only one that I am like I was okay with was Blade Runner 2049. That's the only one that I was like, yeah, if they could just special effects now, that would be one movie sequel that I was like, I could justify. But like, I mean, more Halloween stuff, I,
Mhm.
I, I mean, Michael Myers would be like in his like 70s now,
Aye,
like
aye.
Jason, the Friday the 13th franchise has the most inconsistent timeline with all the sequels, and if Jason was supposed to be a kid in like the 1950s, I, I, I mean, we know he's like a zombie at this point, with how they, rebooted it, but I mean, even that, I mean, he'd be so decrepit, it would be like, even Freddy Krueger, it's like,
Mhm.
we don't need more of the
Have you
the
seen
the
the
hate.
have you seen the Nosferatu reboot, the recent one of that? Have you watched that?
I have not, and
Mhm.
I'll tell you exactly why I'm not going to. That movie, the trailer I saw is like shot for shot
Mhm.
Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah,
And I've heard I made the mistake of like voicing my opinion about the movie on Facebook, and had to get into it with a bunch of people, but thank God there's like more people who think like me versus the younger generation that this movie is like, oh my God, it's so effing good. I'm
Mhm.
like, dude, go back and watch Bram
Mhm.
Stoker's Dracula. It is better than this
Mhm.
movie, and for countless reasons. Gary Oldman was a way better Dracula and vampire than Bill Skarsgård. Not that I don't like Bill Skarsgård,
Mhm.
but I think the original It miniseries with Tim Curry was way better than the It reboot movies. They made It more like Freddy Krueger instead of like what Pennywise is supposed to be. The Crow remake, I don't even get me started on how much like that movie should just not have even been made.
Should not exist.
Um, and then the whole subject of music too, because I interviewed the director of the original Crow, who also did Dark City and
Right.
a bunch of other classic great movies, and we talked specifically a lot about the Crow and the music choices that were used in the film, and more specifically why Hollywood, no matter how much they try, can never recreate or recapture the magic that was,
Mhm.
in The Crow. It was a movie of the times because all the music that was in that movie, and Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails worked with the director to specifically handpick each band that was used in the film. And
Mhm.
one of the on topic of shoegaze and noise rock, Medicine, I actually discovered from that movie, who I've since been following. I'm a big fan of. along with just Nine Inch Nails in general and
Mhm.
all the other music that was in that movie. I mean, it's just like you cannot do that, and it's more about also about just respect for the dead.
Mhm.
The fact that Brandon Lee, died tragically before the film, came out and they had to finish it. But I actually just learned this. The stunt actor who played took over for the rest of the shooting for the original Crow that they digitally imposed Brandon Lee's face on for the rest of the film after he, sadly passed, actually is the guy who like wrote and directed and is like behind the John Wick franchise.
Well, really?
Yeah. Um, which I was like that I found really interesting because that would make a lot of sense,
Yeah.
with how his knowledge of like weapons and combat and stuff like that, which you can obviously see translates to all the
Mhm.
John Wick
Yeah, yeah,
movies.
yeah.
I mean, the second one especially, how he's getting all his weapons to go do the hit thing, and the dude's giving like the full description of like every single weapon, that he has, and like only someone who is like a stunned person, and familiar with like weapons and stuff like that would have the knowledge to like
Would get off on that, aye.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. The only movie from what's his name, Robert Eggers, that I like is The Northman.
I haven't seen it.
That one is really good. It's like a Viking epic,
Yeah, yeah.
a Viking like action epic. And on the Skarsgård, it's the oldest one. What's his name? Alexander Skarsgård
Mhm.
is the star, and what's her name? Anya Taylor Thomas or whatever. The actress who he uses in like most of his movies is in that, and that one was really good because that was like accurate and actually also on the subject of music. Bjork
Mm.
has a role in it. It's like a Viking spirit or goddess or something. That movie is worth watching. Just his other stuff, I kind of I'm a big horror movie fan, especially from like the old stuff from like the 70s and 80s, and I guess the 90s is technically old now, but I see a lot of directors and new like people that are big right now that all I kind of see is, like exactly what we were talking about earlier with like the wrong example of what you brought up earlier. We were talking about with like how, art imitates art, and you take influences from,
Mhm.
stuff from the past and everything. And I'm also very like, picky with film and stuff because I'm like, I would consider as much as I'm in the music, I'm probably twice as much or three times as much in the film. And I just kind of see like the people that are big right now that are like dominating the charts, especially with like Nosferatu and movies like Hereditary and stuff like that. Like I just I see too much of like stuff that was to me is like not that old. You
Mm.
know, I know, the 80s, for some people is over 40 years ago, and a few years away from that myself. But like I was born in the late 80s, grew up in the 90s, and got like the best of both worlds because everything that was like 70s and 80s was still like very relevant in the 90s. And it wasn't until we got to like the 2000s, more so into the 2010s and on, that we're like in this era where we feel the need to like reboot these popular franchises from like how many decades prior. I mean, I love Texas Chainsaw, I love Freddy, I love Jason. The only one that has been consistent with like staying in the same canon or whatever you want to call it is Chucky, the Child's Play stuff. That's the only franchise from that would technically be from the 80s that is still, in the same universe, and consistently making like good stuff, even with the series. But I just see too much of like, this was from that. This is clearly a ripoff from this, this other film,
Mhm.
and I know, especially in film and in music too, like you're supposed to take from your influences and make something new, but like the mainstream stuff is like all I see is like no, like I said, Nosferatu just from watching the trailer is like a rip off from Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Mhm.
So much so that it's like I, I don't know how like Coppola isn't suing Eggers for like clearly ripping off, so many just shot for shot scenes from his Dracula.
Mhm.
And I know people shit on Keanu Reeves for, you know, having a shitty, British accent, but like, look at the dude now, you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you and I personally think Anthony Hopkins was fantastic as Van Helsing. I think Winona Ryder was way hotter and a better actress than Johnny Depp's daughter. And I don't like that she's in it because it just is like the whole Nepo baby thing.
Mhm.
I mean, I get, that like, if you're in Hollywood and all that, I mean, obviously, we've had the first generation or even second generation with some people, depending on like the family dynasties. But I'm just like sick of like I guess it would be the newest generation of like Nepo babies in Hollywood, where it's like just because like your mommy or daddy is like so and so, they automatically get like a pass to have, a career in whatever it is, music, Hollywood,
Mhm.
acting, whatever. And I just don't think that's like fair to how many other people want to become, actors because they were fans of, either their parents or even, film is literally over 100 years old now. There's so much of it that, you can be a fan of, this, and that person that has been dead for like 50 plus years, and say that's your inspiration. But, I just, I have respect for basically the celebrity parents that say, to their kids, if this is what you want to pursue, then, I'm going to cut all funding to you and you
Mhm.
have to do do this on your own and literally make it on your own with no help from, me or your mother or your
Mhm.
uncle or, whoever is like, connected in Hollywood. You have to do this on your own, and if you fail, it's because you're not good, basically. But if you succeed, then that means, you do have what it takes and
Mhm.
you worked hard and you understand what it's like to struggle, just like we had to, you know, to to get to where we are now in our status in Hollywood. That's that's what I think I feel and a lot of other, people, not just in America, but seeing how it's happening all around the world in film right now. That's just how I feel because that's how I was
Mhm.
raised. I was raised, you have to work hard. You have, if you want to succeed, no one's going to help you. You have to basically do it on your own and find the help, with working with people that, you did by you networking and you connecting with those people and you really having to struggle and starve, to get to where you want to be. And that's really the old fashioned, type of thinking. And I think we've gone away from that a lot, especially with like the Gen Zers.
But and that's like what we were both saying before, very worried about the future of not just cinema, not just music, but
Mhm.
us as a society as
Mhm.
a whole. I think
Yep.
that's like a big concern, but didn't mean to go on a philosophical,
It's all right.
theological rant right there, but I'm very passionate about film and I'm very opinionated also. But I think my opinionation and those opinions are valid, and any real like cinema goer or person who considers them a music aficionado, or whether it's on rock or shoegaze, rap, jazz, country, or just music in general, I think would agree with me on that. That's just my take.
What's up, all my fishes in the sea? Thanks again for tuning in and for being a subscriber. Your continued support means a lot. I want to let all my guppies in the sea know you can now purchase custom fishbowl merch by DMing me, Sam Fish, on Instagram at thefishbowl88 or on Facebook at thefishbowl. Get hooked on yours today. We have custom t-shirts, mugs, pens, handbags, hats, beanies, hoodies, everything to make you the coolest looking fish in the sea. And if that's not enough, I am now accepting early access subscribers on my Buzzsprout website. That's right, you can subscribe for early access to the Fishbowl's content, as well as I am accepting donations to help keep the show going. Again, your support means the most. It's the most important fishes in the sea to keep the unit going. Thanks again, y'all. Keep tuning in, and let's all keep swimming upstream.